Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you for Innovation Space series of webinars. This is our 12th edition. And as previous ones, we are tackling another topic from corporate innovation and the space of changes that are happening around both corporate and startup world, but focusing on corporate issues now. And this time we're gonna talk about something which has to be topic of 2020, is how to adapt to the new normal, or whatever that means. And we're gonna discuss more about that with our guest today, Afonso. And we are kind of doing a bit of a different thing this September, October, and November, because parallel with these sessions and the series of webinars, we are organizing our corporate innovation conference, which is one of our flagship products. I wouldn't even say product, it's basically a gathering of all of us who are dealing with corporate innovation and who are working on it in both in the region and worldwide. And we've started with day one of the conference several days ago, and are now preparing for a day two, which will be on October 28th. And the day one was more focused on let's say, a big picture strategy and the reasons why corporates need to innovate and how to do and how to track some of those things. And as we progress, such as the day two, we're gonna deal with more of a hands-on day-to-day activities that you need to do, methodologies you need to use in order to make your company more innovative and agile to handle all the topics and all the issues, changes that are happening around the world. And one of the speakers there, he'll tell you more about it, but one of the speakers there will be our guest today, Afonso. Very, very briefly about him, because I'll let him tell you more and tell you a bit of his experience dealing with Belgrade and Serbia. He has been working for 17 years in a different fields, from marketing to tech consulting, corporate entities, etc. And the last 3 years, he's his own boss and his own man, and founder at Saint Brand. And he is the person who actually pushes and helps corporates to innovate, help them validate, and take all their ideas from the ground up and make them running, and help them survive that very difficult and treacherous time of moment of idea growth to some kind of sustainability. I'll again let him tell us more, but thank you, Afonso, for being with us, and welcome. Always happy to host you. Always happy to talk to you. For the starters, I know you've been here for 7 times already, or something like that. Any comments? Any fun facts? Any
Sure.
insights?
Sure. So first, thank you to ICT. Thank you to you, Lucas, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in. I hope we make this worth your while. One thing that I've learned is listening to webinars has actually become very fun. And I think you've hit a nice time of the day. Could be some people's last thing before they have dinner. So let's hope we make the most of this time together. Yes, well, I was on a plane on the 7th of March. And if you remember or recall, that's approximately 1 week before COVID wave 1 was going to hit us all and bring the new reality that we know today. But I have to say, I've really come to love Belgrade. I cannot say I know the country because I do not. But I know my way around. I know where to go. I've tested enough hotels now to know where I like to stay. But it never ceases to surprise me how much corporate innovation and corporate rethinking is very forward-thinking in Serbia. Like me, you are looking for more business models. That is it. They don't need to be radical. I know innovation is this word that has such radical behind it, but to embrace innovation, to find a new business model, to work with innovation for revenue is where I felt that we have a symbiosis. And I've really enjoyed being a coach at the Innovation Management Academy. Hope to do it again in various formats. But today, I'm here to talk to you exactly about how do we adapt to the new normal? How do we find new business models? Because that's what I do. And luckily, in the last 3 years, I've been able to launch a corporate startup every year. So that's, for me, a win. I'm not just working on one, sometimes more than one, but 80% of my time I'm focused on, okay, let's get a new business model out for a corporate company. And that's so far going well, but stakes are high now with every new change.
Good to hear that. We're always more than happy to host you here. And going back to the thing you said, that we do have to adapt. What changed in your day-to-day life or your work life since the COVID situation started? You said you're launching, or you were or are launching one corporate startup a year approximately. How did your job as someone who is consulting big corporates change? What was your pre and post COVID? We are still not post, but pre.
No. So what has permanently changed is the way I do validation. And if you are going to build a corporate startup or a corporate new department, a new business, you want to make sure it's going to be successful. And that is only done with validation. This is where we, or I myself with corporate companies, have an advantage. We have customers. And this is where startups obviously are trying to find customers. So that is the big difference between the startup and the corporate venture startup innovation program. But validation takes speaking to them. And at this point in time, that has radically changed pre-COVID to now and forever, which is, how do I get in touch with customers when A, they are all home, they're not out in the street in context, in situ, in the customer journey. B, when they're time poor to spend more time on the phone or online with another individual. And when C, there's a lot of frustration in the market from customers. They've been expecting a lot of their power as a customer, and they haven't had that delivered over this course because companies are struggling. And so that has changed for me. I've had to adopt new tools. I've had to adopt new ways of training people to work together. But thankfully, touch wood, as they say, I'm learning and trying to get better at it in speaking to customers and understanding their pain and turning that into business models.
I myself know that this process can be quite painful, and it takes some time, and it takes a will to accept the feedback from the market when you try to validate your idea. Do you find that right now this process lasts longer, or people who do it need maybe a bit different skills, just building on that issue?
I think that lasts longer or shorter really depends on, do you have money to pay for people or not, or give them a prize or a reward? That unfortunately still is a little bit of the case. But I think skills, yes. I think more and more I've noticed that I need to train again on how to write the right questions. And the time poor, when we sit together, Lucas, and I want to validate a business, I can ask you and pull the right information from you. I can just sit back and listen, and you can use many, many words, and I will be able to find my insights and turn it into data. When I'm speaking to you and you are in between call 1 and call 170 of your day, you don't have the same flux and the same discourse. So I've had to using, in this case, Miro, which is a tool, really plan very well what are the pieces of information I need to extract according to my assumptions, and how will I extract them, and how will I edit this to a very, very must-have answers. So I use Moscow prioritization as well, which is must-have, should have, could have, won't have. And I go back to saying, I, from my 5-minute conversation, must have this. And so, yes, I've had to do more interviews in quantity with less questions. I've had to use people's time empathetically a lot more than before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's changed my skill set, and for colleagues of mine as well.
Sure. And how did I know that first couple of weeks of COVID were hellish, and the hell broke loose. But what actually changed? You work with the corporates who do want to innovate. Did their approach, their logic, their needs, or something, did they change when they communicate with you?
So we had the moment where, and I think I'm one of the fortunate people, I think like you, who we were able to do our job from home. Some people were not. And so with doing this from home, I think there was a responsibility. I'm building a corporate startup for Luminous, an EDF child company, and the big wind energy provider and energy provider tout court here in Belgium. And I think there was a responsibility from every single employee. It's like, okay, we're going home tomorrow, but this is going to be business. We're going to be responsible. We're going to be accountable. We're going to be online, and we're going to dress properly. I'm wearing a blazer out of this great call we're having, but who wears a blazer at home? And so in the beginning, we were very structured. And one thing that I noticed was, apart from everyone having internet problems, my child is on the laptop and the iPad and doesn't work, and I can't hear you. You're on mute. Apart from that joke side, work became again waterfall. We were going towards agile in companies. Let's do an iterative approach towards processes and move to, well, okay, I will do this and I will get back to you in an hour. And then you do that. And then I do this and I do that. So all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, this is the whole collaborative notion is becoming waterfall again for us to get to a result. And so we had to adopt new tools and new use of tools to be able to have collaboration. Mural, Miro, InUX, Figma, other tools that my colleagues and my friends and peers have been adopting to keep people together online, working together. With that, I was able to start hosting workshops, doing, of course, breakout rooms in different platforms. But you also come against challenges because big companies don't have contracts with certain providers, and you're doing so. Companies had to allow you to be entrepreneurial. So in the end, after that pendulum of I'm going to be serious, people started wearing t-shirts, and the pendulum of normality came back in, and people started creating their own Miro boards, and people who never adopted the tool started. So it actually accelerated people's adoption of becoming entrepreneurial just to keep business as usual and ultimately serve the customer, because that's what we were doing. We were trying to make sure that, okay, let's not lose customers in a moment where acquiring new ones is going to be virtually very difficult or very slim on the overall gains.
And I would also like to add, now looking at what you said, is that I think that we understood during this time, please correct me if I'm wrong, that this is it. It's here to stay. And I can take the most of this webinar, which I would consider second-rate option to going to an event a year ago, to now, okay, this is a thing I do, and I really devote my time not just to find the webinars I'm interested, but also to get in touch with people that I want and get the meetings that are online coffees or something like that, which was
because we're going to go into 2021. And it's going to be a year that people say, it's a write-off. It is. It's very difficult for business at the moment. But at the same time, in a normal year, you would have gone to the movies, you would have watched books, you would have had conversations, maybe do a course. You can do that. It just takes that first few steps, especially for people who do spend a lot of time behind their computer and say, but I don't have more time for anything. Respect. It's true. It's true. But at the end of the year, you do want to look back and maybe find another way to fill in these webinars, to fill in knowledge sharing with other people to learn. One thing I do want to say, which I think worked very well in terms of working habits, just to round that personal side up, is we all suffered from a sense of silence. That sense of silence was at night. There's no traffic. There's no people. That sense of silence was very much, there's not many digital ads anymore. There is not much I can order apart from pajamas. And this silence was also in emails. People respected that you were working online on a computer all day. And at night, it was quiet. Sense of silence because no one could ask you, how was your weekend? Who cares? Did you watch TV? Of course you did. Did you walk around the park? Of course, there's nothing else. So there was the only conversation for people who fortunately didn't have anything wrong going in their healthy life or the loved ones around them was, supermarket. That is the only thing we could talk about it because you have to plan, because you have to be ready. But there was a sense of silence. And I believe that that was probably the panic and for people who didn't have any problems in their lives in terms of health, that was a scary, frustrating moment that over time we are finding that we don't have to be silent. We can share our opinions, we can do courses, we can collaborate again.
Agreed completely. And this all brings us to that everything changed at one point. And talking now in a more of your client base and people that you work with and for, and how did their demands, requests, needs change for yourself? What did you see? What did you observe?
So I'm going to talk a little bit generally about business, not just the current businesses I'm involved in, but knowing my peers, knowing what's happening. Of course, there's three sides. There's the internal side, what happened in companies. And I'll summarize that. There's many points, but reality is it put a spotlight on the inefficiencies. It put a spotlight on not everyone can be on SAP to sell to the customer because then the system will crash. We don't have enough supply chain to go out. We don't have enough departments in customer service talking to each other because it's different siloed CRM bases. So it put a light on that, and it put a light on how much have I spent in digitalization in the last 5 years, and we're still not there yet. So that's an internal problem. Financially, it put a problem which is, okay, I'm going to have to forecast for a tighter year. And that is in economics, you have the two lines, red line and blue line, red line being revenue. That means, okay, how much can I lose? What can I do to protect my customer base and to keep serving and to be a respected brand? And then there's the blue line, which is value. And that one is still one that we can save and become valuable brands, which brings me to the most important thing. You don't have enterprises without people, unless they're shell companies, but that's not relevant. And you don't have businesses without customers. So it brings me to the customer. Now, the customer is, as we all know, far and beyond the most important thing to your business because you need them to survive. And the customer is powerful, and the customer has the power of choice, the power of voice. But what this ultimately did was show that, wait a minute, we can't really serve the customer. The customer has the perception of power, but they don't have power. Let me put this in an example. A lot of us, humans, thought, wait a minute, I'm at home. I was never home during the day, and I have the heater on, and I have lights, and everything is charging. My laptops, my tablets, and the kids are at home. This is something I should address as my electricity bill, and I should call my energy provider. And now, not only did they have an influx of data, but you're like, but I'm the customer, I should be able to speak to them. That they couldn't answer your call, you would probably not be able to get a new provider to come and change your energy bill because it takes a meter reading perhaps, or it takes a technician, and it's COVID and we don't know the consequences yet. So I'm like, well, I'm the customer, I'm right. Yeah, but you can't do anything. And so it forced companies to try to find that blue line, value to you, which is I will give you the business as usual, electricity. You will be paying perhaps more because you're using more, but I will need to find value to give to you. And this is where customer journeys and customer dynamics through empathy came to the spotlight. And I think that's what's changed today, fast forward to today in companies, is COVID has created a faster, bigger, digital first audience, but it has also created an audience that will look for empathy and understanding where I am and my frustrations. An example of this I read is Zappos.com, a shoe retailer, very big. And they noticed that customers were calling and they were ending up having personal conversations. How's your life with this? What's happening? And so they created a hotline just to chat with customers because people needed a human touch. That was assessing the customer journey for empathy. And we will have much more of those going forward.
Very interesting changes are ahead of us and happening here. Now that you mentioned it, a couple of examples, could you give a bit of a good case, bad case, or a good case and not so good case, let's be nice, of who handled or which companies did handle some things well, or we should follow and we should look up, or try to copy, emulate, or something like that?
Well, I'm going to go for the, if you look at the wild beast, and there were two amongst many, so wild beasts which are hardly hit: hotel industry, aviation, transportation business. These were, these are angry hit beasts out there. And I'm going to try to give an example of a good and a bad. Now, we all know hotels suffered, and I'm not talking big, small, because we need to, of course, focus that most, especially in Europe, most enterprises are SMEs. They're small, medium companies. But some hotels open their doors to become corporate offices. WeWorks with full measures of security. Marriott did that, and that's a very big hotel, as we know. Courtyard chain did it. But then you had a boutique hotel, which I actually can see from my window. I'm in Brussels, which is called Jam. And what they did is you can rent the rooms for parties with your bubble. And so you find new business models empathizing with what people need. And will that make these hotels ultimately survive? I don't know. I don't know what the revenue model is, but it seems difficult when you used to fill up rooms to be doing that. So, but that's a good example of empathizing. A bad example, or less good example of empathizing, is I actually saved these emails. Is I have many emails, and I mean over 6 emails, I think that's many, from Thalys, which is the high-speed train from Paris to Amsterdam via Brussels, which I used frequently, asking me to rate their customer service and them as a brand. And I'm like, this is the wrong time. You're not empathizing with the fact that I don't travel. I'm probably frustrated, or I have tickets which are unpaid, or that I need to cancel, and it's going to take long. Don't ask me how you're doing, because the business you do isn't relevant. So will I use Thalys again? I don't have an option. Yes, I will. But it wasn't tactful in terms of empathy with what I was going through. And of course, aviation, a bigger problem there, because that does have to deal with legal terms of, do you give vouchers, do you give refunds, and payment terms. And that is, I'm now being empathetic. That is a very hardly hit beast that there are people who are losing jobs. And I empathize, but at the same time, we invested in maybe trips that we kind of won our money back. So that is a more difficult one that has more legal traumas.
Sure. And just following up on that, I know that we talked and you talked about these big beasts, and then again, boutique hotels that are trying to manage their newfound troubles. Do you consider medium businesses, so someone with, I don't know, approximately 50 to 100 people employed, so covering maybe some smaller geographical region, better equipped or more difficult or more trouble to adapt compared to the big corporates that have giant offices and teams of thousands of people there. I just looking at the good and bad cases that I know from my surroundings. Some medium companies reacted really quickly by like bakeries that have 50 or something people introducing a frozen food delivery, so you don't have to prepare it now and it doesn't get cold, it's cold already. While I knew that some others it took a lot of time for them to realize that the things are here to stay.
So I think the obvious answer to that is not the one I want to give you. The obvious answer would be to say, of course, bigger companies are slower. They have processes, procurement, contracts, consequences. I'm actually not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on the fact it would depend on the size of your customer base, number of services you offer. So the bakery offers bread. So it's a pretty finite, limited scope that you can deviate from. And they probably know all their customers. That's a big advantage. I'll give you an example of my law firm. I don't have a law firm. The lawyers who take care of me, SRS Legal, Portuguese, a small firm, 110 people. They sent me updates of every single change in the law that would affect my life because they know everything about my life. So I felt protected. But then again, they're a legal firm. They know all their customers by name, by hair color, by habits. So the more you know about your customer and the less consequences you have in your product portfolio, the better, because you don't want to create new things that cannibalize. So yes, they are probably better equipped because their customer base is smaller and they're able to know them better. That would be my answer to your question.
Again, going back and just to share an example, and you mentioned internal things. I know that we talk a lot that you need to understand your customer, but I know a lot of examples of companies who called on their maybe the biggest customers or the biggest deliverers, so people who depend on them, just to check up, look, we are doing okay. How are you doing? Can we do anything? Would a small order or any letter of recommendation mean something right now? And I think that these small gestures that don't necessarily need to take a lot of money and time are what makes a company score 10 on its MPS and not 9. And I think that we saw that those things don't really depend on how big budget or revenue a company has. It depends on a culture it develops internally and then projects externally towards its customers.
Yes, and I also have an example, if I may share, which is a B2B to C example. So we were talking very much B2C, people who know us, know the customers. AB InBev, the largest alcoholic drinks distribution company, I believe they're the largest. I don't want to be quoted on that because there's also the Heineken group.
Sure.
AB InBev, they, I don't go to an AB InBev store. They sell and they produce, they supply, they distribute beers, amongst other drinks, but generally beers. Now, AB InBev created a system for me to buy beer vouchers to then consume in my local boutique bars. So they were protecting their business by protecting the small bars. And they were just selling vouchers, saying, normally on Friday, you would go for a beer with a friend. Why don't you buy them a voucher today? Send it to them. And once legally allowed, you will go to that bar, you give them the voucher, you drink your beer. It was a very empathetic gesture, again, towards the bar owners who are suffering, as we know. They had orders and they had empty, and now they have empty tables. So that was a very beautiful example to me of seeing how businesses found new business models that are not going to save their lives, but it is showing that they care about their customer. In this case, small bars and Horeca hotel channels, etc.
Sure. great example. Loving it. But we are kind of exiting that period when you needed or had to or should show empathy and care about the people who are suffering or scared for this about the COVID situation. This is becoming the new normal, as the topic of this says. So what are the chances, or what are the opportunities that are opening up for the companies right now as we move away from that health crisis to constant crisis or new way of work? What companies should do? Any advices? Any thoughts?
Well, let's look at, there are less customer touch points today. People are going to go out less. Winter is coming. There are less ways of being in touch with the customer in a physical world. There is door knocking is not going to happen if that is your customer journey, and customers are going to have less and less time to engage physically with brands. So what companies have to start doing is making sure that they have to serve customers. And now I'm thinking in, let's say, customer care and customer service, where people may dial in to speak to a company, to know about a product, acquire a product, be served for a product they bought, is they need to start having third-party support that they can grow and increase and decrease coming a crisis. That means all of a sudden, all of these companies were getting calls and less staff. And how do they deal with it? So they need to start having contracts in place where can we find support in case influx of information is needed. The second thing is, companies also need to be ready on how am I going to share this information internally in a faster way and better way, and what I want to call network judgment. This is actually coined, I believe, by the Harvard Business Review, which is, if a customer calls and a service representative does not have the answer, but knows who the customer is, but the other person is not in and they're not able to do, you need to give them tools that they can make a network judgment. Slack is a great tool. A chat way of asking someone in a different department instead of transferring the customer, the call, the whatever is going on to somebody else. So they need to start having network judgment concerns on how they're going to deal in case this happens with the new normal. Ultimately, in the new normal, the customer will win again, because companies are going to go, and I'm sure they're going to go out of their way to find ways to serve and empathize with the customer. This means customer acquisition costs are going to go higher. It's terrible news. No company wants to hear this. I mean, it's going to be more expensive and more difficult. Not necessarily difficult, perhaps more expensive, because there's less customers, or customers are just looking for the brands which they want to be loyal to. They're going to defend these customers because forecasts of growth are lower. So that is going to go higher. But loyalty, on the other hand, done right, loyalty will be longer as well. So the customer lifetime value will also go up. So it's going to be a song and dance where the customer will gain and the brand will gain in the long term, but it's going to cost money. It is going to bring less revenue, but it is going to help brands be even more purposeful than they were. A note on brands: they're not to blame. Just like we entered into panic mode, they entered into panic mode. I know so many professionals who were all of a sudden looking again at all the customer journeys and all the potential and how can they protect and serve the customers who today are, to an extent, stuck during wave one, and who now might leave and will assess, am I happy with this brand? And let's not forget, we are entering a new normal. And there's this window right now where people will make decisions like, okay, winter is coming. I don't know if we are on wave 2, 2.5, 1.7. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. So let me find companies, brands, contracts that I'm happy with. It could be my telco brand. It could be my water supplier, but it could be the supermarket I use. So people will have a smaller universe and they will buy from the same brands if those brands protect and serve them, and they will.
Thank you. I want to move to some of the questions from the audience because we got some interesting insights. A very tricky one. How can companies get customer-centric if their employees don't understand the client focus? How to get the brand promise around and promote core values to the employees so they can focus properly on customers?
Wow, that is tricky. It's like
$1 million question. So
like
please,
a
30
Kinder
seconds.
surprise. Here you go. Have fun. So now, fortunately, those employees are human. I hope, and those employees can empathize with anything. Empathy is not a very difficult example. It's a low common denominator of understanding imitation and feelings and emotions, and so it is possible to find empathetic exercises to make people understand the emotions that people go through and be able to understand where is the friction point. So those exercises exist, and any company can do them. Where is the friction point? Because for some companies, it might be before they sell. In your case, how do I acquire customers? For some people, it could be post. I don't like this anymore, or I can't get in touch with you. So you will need to find ways of attracting customers by understanding what makes them, how do you meet their expectations? That's the question. How does your company meet their expectations? And once you know that, you know your addressable market, you know the size of your market. Sometimes it's a great surprise, sometimes it's not. It could be, oh, my customers who want, pink with yellow dots, with a light and a hat, not that many. But okay, I'll be the best there. Or maybe my product needs to flex to understand how can I meet their expectations? And that's what the exercise you need to do. In terms of acquisition, we all know that there's any acquisition channel. But that again goes back to getting to know what the customer that likes pink, yellow dots with a hat and a light, what moment do they want to be acquired? What is happening in their life? One thing I wanted to say, which might add to this question, and I mentioned earlier, this morning I spent the whole day working on customer segmentation in a workshop with 3 people. And the COVID segment is, yes, a segment that is protecting themselves from the virus. Yes, a segment that does practice social distancing, but it's ultimately a segment which is digital first. Some by force because of what happened now. So they will engage with digital channels, but they will want to speak to you as a brand face to face. So this is actually a paradox because we've been developing such great chat boxes and AI automation systems to answer to customer problems. But customers want, no. I'm okay to sign up online, do everything online, get my bill online, pay online, do everything online. But the moment I want to speak to you, I want to speak to you. And this is quite difficult because we're digital brands and now we need call centers. Where are we? We're not in 1990s where there was all call centers, and we're not in 2014 where it's all digital. So we're somewhere in the middle. And I think that COVID audience has grown by force of nature, and they're huge, and we should address them. And I'm happy to take this question also offline if the person wants to identify themselves, because it is there's a lot of exercises you can do to find that empathy.
Just FYI for entire audience, feel free to add Afonso on LinkedIn and write to him. He responds promptly, and for anything you want to continue discussing with him, that's the spot. Just FYI. Yeah, I completely agree, and we've observed that even when employing people now, because we mentioned, do we have right people there? One of the skills that was not as relevant as it is now is the ability of our employees to write or to express themselves, not just towards the customers, but among themselves in writing. And that's a skill set that has to be it doesn't has to be, but it should be worked on. And we just discovered that there are some skills that now have more values than they had pre-March. And yeah.
Interesting. Yes, one thing that I learned from a colleague of mine is you're so much better live than on digital. I was like, oh, I feel so sad. But you know, I can't get more excited online than this, because then it's silly. But I understand, you know, and I don't know, should there be behavioral classes on how to do business online physically? I think there are.
One last question is, when venture building right now, how far in the future can you be planning?
Wow. Okay. For context, I like to think of innovation as innovation for revenue, as I mentioned in the beginning, which is I will use anything to build with the right synergies at the fastest speed something for a company that will give them a new business model. So we're never going to go 10 degrees far from what we do. You don't, you're not, you know, hi, I'm a doctor and I'm also an ice cream parlor owner. You can't do both sometimes very well. So you're not going to go too far, but you're going to go far enough that it's a new business model for the company. So that actually means at this moment, we are living in the world of 12 months down the line. Mm-hmm. Can I prove that it will go further? That is something that I'm starting to be forced to put into a business model and a business case, which is, okay, these channels that you're selling are not valid beyond maybe next year, or maybe if there's another pandemic. So everything which is channel strategy, whenever I create a business case and we're looking at the business model and we say we're going to invest in Facebook ads, we're going to invest in this, there's too much uncertainty on the channel strategy. Sure. And that's been my biggest problem for proving value beyond, okay, we can do next year, the year after, 3 years. How do we prove beyond? However, building new business models for companies is usually, if I go back to Moscow prioritization, it's usually not a must-have. Must-have is to serve your customers well, build your brand, build your company, build you. Should have is, should companies have a venturing arm looking for where they should be? Should, but it's definitely a could. You need to be playing on this should to could frontier, which means should means I should be doing it in the next year, 2 years and a half. Could means I could be doing it next year and the year after and the year after. So there's a responsibility with venture building, which is to look at the company strategy and look at finding sustainable business models to open in 12 months and beyond. However, it is today being challenged from a channel perspective on what is everlasting beyond 2-3 years. We don't know, but generally, I hope that every company still wants to find new business models, because there's so much value today in companies in terms of intellectual power, because no longer we are the company with some slides and ping pong tables. No, we are the employees that had a lot of fun there. And now we're having a lot of fun at home, and we have a lot to build as a future. And companies still have the intellect and the capacity and synergies to create corporate companies, corporate venturing first.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot of build, and should, could. Just for our audience, last note, I know that there are methodologies that people use for venture building, and lean was there, design thinking, agile, whatever. Apart from the way we communicate, so the tools, the Zooms of the worlds and new things, did anything change in the methodology that was the backbone of venture building pre-COVID and now? I'm not talking about do we do it now online, but are the structures behind it the same?
To be honest, I design frameworks for what I do, because we work as a team and we work in collaboration. And yes, now that collaboration is online, as you say. To be honest, I've had to Address all of them. Something about the vocabulary was becoming out of date. Something about the activities you would do in validation is not possible. Something about customer interviews, you don't get that data. I think what's changing with venture building is you're able to do more ventures at the same time than before. And at the moment, I'm able to find more space. I'm not going to say time, but more space to be able to think in multitasking ways than I was before. And that's changing because ultimately corporates who are looking for corporate ventures, they used to do maybe one a year, if or two. Now they're thinking, let's try these 4 things. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of work. But this fast embrace for online collaboration has really helped me look at, okay, what actually matters on a step-by-step basis and what can we actually do? And it's just helped streamline and do a lot more at the same time. Do all of them get the same investment and the same care? No. A lot of them get shut down after 3 months because, whoop, nah, not going, let's go somewhere else. But there's always a bigger pipeline of, we need to try things faster and more, which for corporate venturing it was not the case for me. It was very much, let's do this 5 days a week until it's out, and then let's see if there's maybe one to do next year. So a lot to do.
I could talk a bunch about this topic, and I can see that you could too. But let's give our audience a bit of a teaser for the day 2 of the Corporate Innovation Conference. What will you be talking about? I know that customer centricity is somewhere there, and I know we touched upon it a lot and saw how important it is. So here is the chance for you to tell us a bit more about what will be covered there from your
Of course.
side.
So I'm going to be actually a panel holder. So I'm going to be the moderator of a panel of 3 amazing people in your market you want to hear about, right? We're going to have OTP Banca. We're going to have A1 Telecom, and we're going to have Roche. We're going to have those 3 brands talking to us about customer journeys and what changed for them. So we call it from breaking point to making a point. How do you find your voice again as a brand in a time that we had so much uncertainty on the business? How fast did they go back to redesigning, rethinking the customer journey? What was needed to change? Is it a permanent change? Are they already thinking this is temporary? Let's find out. That's going to take place on the 28th of October in the afternoon again. And I'd love for you to join, ask questions. It's going to be, again, a format like this, but we're going to have 3 panelists. I have a ton of questions for them. I've written to them already, but I don't know if we'll focus on everything, but we're definitely going to learn, because the question I want to know is, what did you do? And is it everlasting? That is what I really want to find out. And I hope you do too, because customer journeys, they are important. They are business, and customers are our lifeline.
Thank you, Afonso. Always more than a pleasure talking to you. And don't worry, you sound as good as in person. I'll see you on 28th, and hope the rest of the guys will see you on the 28th. Again, guys, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to Afonso. I just got one question a second ago, so we'll actually use 1 minute more, or a couple of minutes more of your time.
Absolutely, no.
So it was someone who was probably scared to ask the question, and they're like, this is like a last minute courage. So it says, in your experience with the companies you worked with in the past 6 to 9 months, what has been the best example of differentiation versus a company's top competitor? Value prop, channels, revenue, maybe some other business model canvas segments. Let me try to understand it again. in your experience, what has been the best example of differentiation? So what the best example of differentiation which company achieved in the past 6 to 9 months in any of business model canvas fields? A bonus question for you guys.
I have two sides to that question. I mean, first one I can think about and I can tell you. The other one I still need to think about it. So I'll start talking about the first one. The first part was acquisition on the business model canvas channels. A lot of brands did a very, very tasteful but careful and responsible job in acquiring new customers by giving something for free. And that could be anything from the yoga app Down Dog, here's a free month, or here's a yearly subscription for 35 euros. It's normally 75. It could be LinkedIn, who said, for all of you, those who lost your job, every employee is allowed to give 10 premium subscriptions. That is foregone revenue for the company. Again, it's just giving stuff away, yes, but it was relevant and it helps their acquisition strategy. And I think that if you are a brand who was able to do that, take a hit, but be able to acquire customers to love your brand, use your brand, be an adopter of your brand, why not? So for example, with the yoga app, my wife took it. I use the app now.
Yeah,
it worked. So I have to say chapeau. It's an acquisition channel. However, the most underestimated, or one of the most underestimated part of the business model canvas is key resources.
Okay, tell us more.
It's value proposition is the best one. We love doing value proposition, and it's great because you can change it. But resources really, really is one. I'm trying to think of brands. So yes, local producers. So key resources. When you look at merchants in your area, you will find that a lot of them have found new contracts with local producers, at least for me. I live in Belgium, in Brussels, and most of my supermarket is now supplied with local producers. It's just getting smaller. And I value those key resources and key partnerships that they've developed, because it shows that they are as concerned as me about the planet around me and the carbonization and the effect of having to eat papaya in winter, which doesn't come from here. So I value that part of the business canvas, and I value that a lot of companies are looking at resources very, very tactfully because they are costly. And so I think that's an interesting part of the business canvas, and one that I have to be honest, I'm actively trying to understand how to do better because I never find it a very easy one to do the key resources. What resources are there? What are available? But again, I try to prioritize as much as I can in terms of the subset, the must-haves in building a business. And I think it can always be a good exercise for businesses to do themselves.
Thank you. Really like the way we are finishing this up. Again, last time, thank you. And I see you, and I hope all of you guys on 28th from 1 to 5 p.m., 28th of October, second day of the conference, and be here to learn more about how to do these things.
I want to just thank you, Luca, and I want to thank everyone, the questions, and everyone who is listening in. Always a pleasure to explore ideas with you. We're all trying to figure this out.
Stay in touch and be safe.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ICT.